and welcome to another episode of Earth911, Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and we're back with another fascinating interview. This time it's going to be with Amy Westervelt, who you might know from NPR, from The Guardian, The New York Times, and her own podcast, Drilled, which is a true crime-style podcast about climate change. And if you're not listening today, you should be subscribing soon. Amy is also the creator of the Critical Frequency Podcast Network. It focuses on climate issues. And she was a winner in 2016 of the Edward R. Murrow Award for her exposés about the hidden environmental and human costs of Tesla's Gigafactory in Nevada. That's particularly close to my heart. I learned to do radio in the same room that Ed Murrow did at WSU. So congratulations on that. Now, we're going to talk about plastic. That's the subject today. What's going on with plastic? It's the middle of Plastic-Free July. And at the same time, plastic seems to be enjoying a sustainability renaissance in the media, despite all the concern the public has about plastic pollution. Now, we've covered several plastic recycling technologies recently, and we encourage people to use less plastic all the time. But we're also hoping that if you do buy plastic, you recycle it. Amy's first Drilled episode this year is about plastic and the machinations of one media manipulator named Rick Berman, who has launched the Save the Plastic Bag Coalition among many skeezy campaigns backed by the tobacco, plastic, and oil industries. So you can follow Amy's work at amywestervelt.com. That's Westervelt with a V, V-E-L-T. And the Drilled podcast is at criticalfrequency.org/drilled. Amy, welcome to the show. How are you today?
Thank you so much for having me. I'm good. How are you? Hanging in there.
Another day in the Pacific Northwest. We haven't had record heat in a couple of weeks, but we're expecting that.
Yeah, I actually live up in the Sierra Nevada, and we have been having not quite Pacific Northwest level heat, but it's just hasn't stopped since maybe like the third week of June.
You kind of get past the tipping point.
It's getting old. Yeah.
Your new season of Drilled kicked off last week. And can you tell us what you think the biggest issues facing your listeners as they wrestle with the implications of climate change are right now? What are you going to be covering this year?
Well, this season in particular, I'm looking at the natural gas industry from kind of all sides. We've, I started reporting this season maybe 2 years ago and wound up in this position that will be familiar to anyone who has reported on this stuff, where I had so many things, and I was like, I don't really want to get rid of any of these angles. So we're doing a 3-part season, in part because, the fossil fuel industry is pushing, as it has in the past, the idea that natural gas is part of a green transition, that it is part of a climate solution, all of those things, all of these talking points that have really been debunked over the last decade are still being pushed today. And so I felt like it was a good time to really dig into the many, both environmental and climate implications of natural gas. And the reason I wanted to start with this series on plastic is because I think that the industry has done a really masterful job of somehow getting people to forget that plastic is made from fossil fuels. and that, yes, it is like an immediate environmental scourge, and it gets, it doesn't break down, and it gets into the stomachs of birds and fish and all of these things that we've been hearing about for a long time now. But it is also a major contributor to climate change. One of the plants that we're looking at in this story is projected to be the #1 contributor of CO2 and other greenhouse gas emissions in the country when it's online, and it makes plastic. So anyway, I feel like it's kind of just a good time to really get settled in people's minds the idea that natural gas is not in fact a climate solution, and that it is actually part of lots of more immediate environmental problems as well.
Well, you start off the show talking about how 10 years ago, plastic seems seemed to have really lost its luster, but it kept growing. We use more
Hmm.
of it than ever. And it's back with this new sustainability message.
Hmm.
What happened?
Well, I think that what happened, I mean, what we've kind of found happened is that, well, two things. One, that the fracking boom really led to a plastics boom because fossil fuel companies realized that they could make plastic out of some of the byproducts of fracking, which is, the word for hydraulic fracturing. It's a way that people drill to get both gas and oil. And that if they could use these kind of byproducts of fracking to make plastic, that was a cheaper feedstock than petroleum, which is how plastic has usually been made. And so there was this kind of drive to do that, to create all these what they call ethane cracker facilities, to take those um, elements from fracking and turn them into plastic nurdles to make all kinds of plastic things. And at the same time, there's been a downturn in use of fossil fuels for transportation and residential, even before the pandemic that was
Sure.
starting to happen. So, fossil fuel companies are not run by idiots. They can read the tea leaves better than most, and they for a long time have been talking about how petrochemicals and especially plastic is essentially their escape hatch for when revenues drop off in these other sectors. So as much as, I think the fossil fuel industry is pretty good at trying to make it seem like all these problems are really just driven by consumer demand. In fact, as consumer demand falls in one area, they look for ways to gin it up elsewhere or to shift their supply chain in a way that they can continue to, kind of produce and sell the same amount of stuff.
One of the artistries that you're describing is this misdirection that
Yes.
petrochemical industries have mastered over the course of the past 50 years since they first decided to suppress climate change information. You profile Rick Berman in the first show, and he's the spinster behind the Save the Plastic Bag Coalition. He, strikes me as the Frank Lutz of the 2010s, hopefully not the 2020s.
Yeah.
But how dangerous is this guy to the public discourse about plastic?
I think extremely dangerous. I mean, he really, he was kind of, I feel like Rick Berman sort of picked up where, the infamous crying Indian ad left off, right? This is an ad from the 1970s that was created by the packaging industry
Through
to
Keep America
create,
Beautiful.
yes, through Keep America Beautiful, which sounded like, just a conservation org, right? To convince people that all this pollution that they were seeing was their problem, and that, it was all people being litter bugs and all these kinds of things, and not, the companies that were profiting from packaging. And, then, yeah, fast forward a few decades and you have Rick Berman, who is coming up with all kinds of front groups for the plastic companies. And my favorite is the Save the Plastic Bag Coalition, which actually, like filed lawsuits to try to stop bag bans. They also, Berman and the Save the Plastic Bag Coalition tried to even pass preemptive laws in some states to say that they couldn't pass bag bans and things like that. So I think that in general, I mean, I don't know. I spend a lot of time researching disinformation across multiple industries, and I think that it is a really big problem. And I think there's a little bit of a sense that it's a kind of a recent thing that's come about, and that it's social media, it's this, it's that. But these tactics have been used by industries that have some need to get around regulation for a really long time. And so they are now very sophisticated and they know exactly what works. And, Berman is like very good at his job. you know, he's
good at being
he's
evil in a way.
Yes, I mean his nickname is Dr. Evil. I don't know who christened him that, but it stuck. So yeah.
Well, so what tales, what spin should we be watching out for from the Rick Berman sector of this discussion?
Yeah, I think number one is that there continues to be this very effective strategy to divorce plastic from fossil fuels. So, just I think we cannot remind people enough that those two things are inextricably linked. And that not only does it take fossil fuels to make plastic, but also, like the factories making this stuff also emit CO2 and other greenhouse gases. So it's very, very closely tied to climate change. And I mean, that's something that I think I saw even in the climate movement for a long time, that people almost kind of poo-pooed plastic as like, oh, it's like a consumer issue, or it's like a short-term environmental issue, or like it's a mom issue. That was a thing I saw too. And like, we can't think about these things as separate issues. That's a big one. And then I think, as a result of the pandemic, the petrochemical lobby pushed really hard to try to get a lot of people thinking that, everything had to be wrapped in plastic. And they managed to, really increase usage pretty significantly. But we're seeing already that is not looking like it's going to hold. So that's good. But yeah, just kind of, I would say, if you hear something like, oh, it's unsafe to bring your bags to the grocery store, like figuring out where that came from is a good idea.
Yeah, it's been good to see my reusable bags being acceptable again, but
yes,
that's so bizarre that reusable bags wouldn't be acceptable.
I know. I mean, in the early days of COVID, I think it was just there were so many unknowns and no one really knew how it spread. So yeah, but the plastic bag lobby was behind that too. The AFPM, the American Fuel and Petrochemical Manufacturers, really pushed for this. They put out kind of a I can't say fake exactly because they're quite careful about not directly lying, but a very misleading study about the dangers of people's reusable bags, and it worked for a while. So yeah.
I'm surprised I've survived using my reusable bags based on what they told me. Now, let me ask a question.
Yeah.
Do you think that the petrochemical industry could ever get circularity and actually practice it? Because, one of the problems is the extraction of more oil or gas in order to produce plastic. But then we've also been talking with molecular recycling technology makers recently, and they claim that they can break plastic all the way back down into the individual molecules that you could then use to make more plastic, which of course eliminates the need for more drilling. Is that viable based on what you have learned about the plastic industry? Even if we did master that level of recycling, is oil ever going to give up on oil?
This is where the fact that so many of the, plastics companies are actually oil companies really becomes a problem, because if it was a packaging manufacturer that had no ties at all to the fossil fuel industry, then yeah, maybe. But I don't know that there are any companies that fit that description, So unfortunately, they are currently tied to another industry that has a very large interest in keeping fossil fuels in the mix with plastic. So I think there's no way really to get that to work if you can't kind of get the fossil fuel guys out of the way. And like I said, I mean, they really, like, if you look at their annual reports for the last 5 or 6 years, they're really banking on plastic as kind of this silver bullet save for their revenue as people transition away from fossil fuels. So yeah, I don't know. I mean, I hate to be this like negative Nancy that's like, they're never going to do it. But I think that really, if we want the fossil fuel companies to behave differently, they have to be required to behave differently. They're not people, as much as they have worked really hard to convince everyone that they are. They're companies, and they are going to do whatever they can legally do to maximize shareholder profits. That's their entire reason for existence. And that's fine. Like, I don't, they're doing what they've been legally set up to do. Right. So if we want them to do something different, then we have to change the structure in which they're operating.
So that's an interesting question. What's the first step to making that change? And we had Sarah Dearman from the Recycling Partnership on our show a couple of weeks ago, and she pointed out something really important, which was that we really need to just simplify the plastics we use.
Yes.
Plastic number 7 is just everything invented since the numbers were introduced, basically.
Right.
So is all unrecyclable.
Right.
And Sarah's point was, if we forced the industry to make recyclable plastics and put the recycling in place, that would be a good step. Do you think that's true?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think definitely. I mean, I just think that for far too long, the government has kind of gone along with the industry's strategy, which is to make this a consumer problem. And it's not. I mean, yes, consumers have a responsibility. And, there are things that we can buy less of or buy differently and so forth. But if in a case like this, where it's like we have no control over what type of plastic, is used by these companies, then it has to be regulated.
So let's talk about plastic-free July. You've explained that you have complicated feelings about it. Just to focus on ocean plastics, which is well-founded, distract us from this, still rising tide of plastic that's washing through our lives?
I think so. I think it's a both and. I think that we absolutely need to get on top of the ocean plastics problem. And part of how we do that is by stemming the amount of plastic that's being made, period. And I would say too, just kind of following on from the last point too about consumer action, I would never ever suggest that someone reducing the amount of plastic that they use in their own life is not a valuable endeavor. It 100% is, not just because, people should live their values and that's like a good thing to do in general, but also because, it models that behavior for other people. If like with Plastic Free July, part of the point, right, is to get so many people doing it at once that it really does actually like show up on the balance sheets of these companies and things like that. And I think that is a super worthy endeavor. And I think that, really kind of the way that kind of action delivers real results is by connecting with, other people who are doing the same things and then connecting that action to larger policy pushes.
Well, and the challenge for me with Plastic Free July is that it tends to focus on certain artifacts, plastic artifacts like the straw.
Right.
Because there's the walrus with the straw that's nose. Everybody knows that image. Know the image of the plastic in the stomachs of animals. But what I feel like happens when people focus on ocean plastic is they kind of ignore all the other plastic that's in their life, and it's thinking critically about your choices, which I don't think we're armed to do with information these days. How do you suggest people communicate to brands that they do business with that they want less plastic? What do you think works?
That's a good question, because I do think that when there's a critical mass of consumers all saying, we want you to do X, Y, Z, companies do start to listen to that. And I think that, I kind of think like less packaging across the board is a good kind of message to be giving to companies. And I think, using recyclable plastic if they're going to use plastic, ideally moving away from plastic packaging altogether. And I mean, I feel like there's a good example of this in the Brita filter case study. Have you looked at this? Yeah, like where, it's like one thing that like people were just like, why can't this happen? And they have actually like taken steps to improve that whole product line and supply chain process, which is great. But I think that I don't know. I feel like that's kind of the key, is like focusing on one thing, getting lots of people involved, getting lots of attention on it, and having a really specific ask for companies tends to be the thing that works.
Would you write a letter saying, "Hey, I love your products, but I just am not going to buy them anymore unless you get rid of the plastic"?
I think you could write a letter. It's probably more effective if you write a letter that represents 5,000 people, or 10,000 people. Yeah. Like, I think it's sort of like if you can coordinate your letter with lots and lots of other people and like maybe get some press on it too, that tends to have some impact. But there again, it's kind of, the thing that works is being really specific and focusing on one thing, right? But then you end up with this problem of companies kind of doing one thing at a time instead of addressing the problem writ large, which I know some companies are starting to do too. Like I know, Unilever has had this program for a long time where they're trying to reduce the amount of plastic in their packaging. A lot of the beauty companies are looking at it too, and I think that a lot, I would say probably all of that has been driven by consumer demand and organizing, like people who are able to sort of organize all those consumer voices into a campaign.
Well, I'll tell you, it's great to have someone like you out there doing the reporting you're doing to help us catalyze that movement, because it is effective. We see it at Earth911 that people make a difference in how companies serve them. But I want to thank you for taking your time. Can you tell us, how to keep up on Drilled and find other critical frequency podcasts?
Yes. Yeah. So all things Drilled are living at drillednews.com. We have we've done 5 seasons to date. This is our 6th season, and all of those are cataloged on the podcast page. But then we also have quite a bit of supplementary reporting around all of those seasons.
Yeah, you can dig in and have a good time reading about it.
There's a lot there. I know I was just looking at it today that I need to maybe go in and organize it more, because there's so much now. And then we also have a newsletter called Hot Take that comes out every Sunday. And you can find out more about that at hottakepod.com. And that also has a podcast attached to it. And then Critical Frequency is criticalfrequency.org. And we have several podcasts, many of which are environment or climate themed. So, yeah.
Great. Well, Amy, I want to thank you for your time, and have a great day.
Thank you so much. Yeah, thank you so much. You too.
We've been talking with Amy Westervelt. She is the host of the Drilled podcast and, of course, co-founder of the Critical Frequency Podcast Network. So check her out at Amy Westervelt. That's Westervelt with a V.com. And she's at criticalfrequency.org/drilled is where you can find the Drilled podcast and learn more about the show and all the background information there, because it really is. There's a lot there to dig into if you find the topic interesting. This is Earth 911 Sustainability in Your Ear. I'm Mitch Ratcliffe, and we're going to be back with another interview soon. In the meantime, I hope you'll share this podcast with your friends. We've got to get these ideas out there, folks, so that everybody starts thinking about when and how to use plastic responsibly, amongst so many other things. Take care of yourself, take care of one another, and let's all take care of this beautiful planet. We'll be back soon. Have a great day.